Bedevilment is a screenplay I wrote in my first year of uni. The logline reads, "A downtrodden introvert with autism confides in a bully's girlfriend in an attempt to stop a chain of psychological abuse at an unfortunate, but potentially hopeful cost." In this essay, I will discuss how I plan to cast the characters, how I'll accommodate the cast, and how I'll use the mise-en-scène and sound design to make an impact on the audience. The main theme of Bedevilment is about the importance of standing up for your own well-being, even if the consequences of that can be dire. Because within reason, there can be room for redemption which leads to an all-round better life. Bedevilment is a character study told within a classical narrative. It is about an introverted and alcoholic autistic man in his 20s named Heath, who has an irrationally phobic reaction to violence as a byproduct of his autism. This leads us to the antagonist, Bailey, who uses prior knowledge of Heath's intense phobia of violence to taunt him through insecurities surrounding his own life situation. This is implied when Heath confides in Bailey's girlfriend, Anna, about Bailey's abusive behaviour, and Anna lets Heath in on secrets of hers and Bailey's relationship. This is also implied in the climax when Bailey tries to murder Heath for grassing him up to Anna. As far as the violent content is concerned, whilst the actions of Bailey against Heath are voyeuristic, one of my priorities is to portray the violence in a way that feels grounded but not exploitative. In casting Heath, my plan is to find a professionally trained actor who actually suffers from autism, specifically someone who is high-functioning but on the mild to moderate side of the spectrum. This would add authenticity to the portrayal of Heath's autism, as opposed to some of the more exasperated portrayals that you would find in films such as Barry Levinson's Rain Man and Lasse Hallström's What's Eating Gilbert Grape. I believe there is still a vast amount of room to boost the representation of autism on screen, in particular in film. Once someone was cast, I will ask them to give me feedback on how I've depicted autism in the screenplay from their point of view, and I will use those opinions to possibly make tweaks to the screenplay if needs be in an attempt to be respectful of people with autism. In terms of ethnicity, I am approaching this from the mindset of colourblind casting. For the central characters, Heath, Bailey, Anna and Joan, I want to cast 50-50 between people of colour and Caucasian people to reflect the world of Brixton in the early 1970s. I will also reach out for racial diversity in the extras, such as the community in the marketplace in scene 3 and the officers at the psychiatric ward where Heath is being held in the final scene. Once Heath was cast, I would also communicate with them further on what being on a film set entails. I would do this to prepare them for what to expect during filming and to see if there are any adjustments that could be made to accommodate their needs. Elements that may need adjusting could be the use of lighting, or how to direct them in the most clear and concise way that they can understand. I would also brief the rest of the cast and crew on those respective adjustments and make them aware of any difficulties that could arise on set. This gives them the beneficial insight to respect and accommodate the needs of the actor who is playing Heath, as well as themselves. After pre-production and before shooting, I would host a table read with the entire cast and crew present to help build chemistry amongst everyone involved to ensure a better working dynamic on set. To achieve this, I would make it as accommodating as possible by bringing drinks and snacks for everybody, bringing name cards with actor and character names on, printed out scripts for all members, and an assortment of pens and highlighters so that the cast and crew can make notes. I believe this extensive practice will help to build compelling character dynamics which will enhance the impact of the story. For Bedevilment, I think it would be beneficial to use the production design and mise-en-scène to convey poignant elements of Heath's character and location. This is because I believe that you can learn so much more about a character just by viewing their personal environments and how they interact with them. Heath, from a costume design standpoint, will be portrayed quite similarly to Arthur Fleck from Joker. The similarities lie in how Heath and Arthur wear casually smart clothing in a scruffy way to show the disenfranchisement of their character's worldview. In the first half, I plan to film Heath with many wide shots and long angles to convey a sense of personal isolation and hopelessness. The opening shots of the first 5 scenes feature Heath looking away from the living world in some way, shape or form, whether it's staring at the alcohol aisle in a corner shop, contemplating traumatic events while strolling through the marketplace, staring at a wall as he drinks and smokes, or talking to his mother on the phone. In scene 5, after Heath's outburst, I plan to use close-ups and long takes to put the viewer into a visceral disorientation that Heath feels in the moment due to the anger. After his interaction with Joan in the hallway of the complex in scene 7, Heath is captured somewhat more confidently interacting with his world as opposed to keeping to himself. For example, he has slightly better eye contact with the world around him, and he's keeping his head up more. This growth in confidence culminates in the final scene when Anna meets Heath at the psychiatric ward and he's doing well. This shows us that Heath isn't as isolated as he may think sometimes and symbolises a bigger sense of hope. Heath's apartment will be a cluttered, unsanitary mess to show the lack of Heath's motivation to live a healthy life after years of failed attempts to help himself with his extreme phobia of violence with counselling. In the second scene, there is a poster advertising a protest taking place the following day in the corner shop window. My intention with this is to reflect the time period because on April 5th, 1972, there was a protest outside Bresson Library against the police brutality and imprisonment of a 38-year-old Jamaican man named Joshua Francis. Although Bedevilment is primarily about Heath's experience in the moment, I wanted to politically reflect the community slightly outside of him to breathe authentic life into this world. I also researched popular brands of common items such as telephones, cigarettes, alcohol, and a cassette player to truly bring Heath's story into 1972. The central colour palette will feature browns, greys, and greens. These colours reflect the overall exterior architecture of Brixton. They also reflect the dark and sombre tone of the film and the apathetic and exhausted state of Heath as a character. For the sound design, my intention is to use it to immerse the audience into what sensory overload and surrounding sound feels like to give them a sense of Heath's discomfort. To achieve this, I will enhance the sound of the violent acts and the moments of mental despair in the film in post-production, to be heightened or drowned out to a degree where they sound unnatural to give the viewer a similar intensity to those actions that Heath feels. My three methods to bring Bedevilment to life are to ground the casting choices in the reality of the characters' worlds, use the mise-en-scène to convey truths about Heath, and use the sound design to reflect Heath's mental state. My overall intention is to convey an authentic depiction of sensory overload within someone with autism, whilst also paying respect to the autistic community. I will achieve this by pulling inspiration not so much from my concrete experiences, but from my personal fears as someone on the autistic spectrum. I will also research in depth about how sensory issues impact the wider autistic community, especially considering I am personally on the mild side of the autistic spectrum. This research will inspire a variety of avenues when it comes to portraying Heath's autism, because it gives me a more well-rounded view of autism as a collective whole, as opposed to simply my worldview.